All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault. Behind the Vault Door, my name is Mark Morelli. I'll be your podcast host, and I've taken a little bit of time off to do a bunch of different things, but I've been itching to do a podcast, and certainly some subjects have come up lately. People are always suggesting, things that we should talk about here. This one came up several times over the course of the last, I don't know, maybe 2-3 weeks, enough that it stuck out in my mind as something that I thought maybe we should discuss, and I think it's an important part of firearm culture. It's one of those things that doesn't get talked about. A lot of people, firearms, you just think, okay, target shooters and, hunters. Like that's pretty much it. That covers it, right? No, not point in fact, no. There's a lot of other people that enjoy many other elements that are connected to the shooting sports. There's gun collection and definitely, competition shooting, and certainly there's a social aspect to this whole thing. And in relation to pop culture, people, I don't think a lot of people understand, certainly my generation, we make a very strong connection to our, silver screen heroes when we think about things like the guns they carried. Like, I mean, it's funny, you talk about movie guns, and certainly you can surf the internet and find enough pictures of movies where your favorite hero is holding a gun, and to know what gun that is, and have the ability to own it is really something special for people that really appreciate film and cinema. And so there's this contingent of people within the firearm community, like a subculture, if you will, that is comprised of people from like all ages. Like, I mean, I've talked to old guys that say, like, Roy Rogers carried this rifle. I love this thing. And that they were their childhood heroes. A lot of gun owners definitely gravitate towards those strong personalities with integrity and honesty, and just the right stuff. You know what I mean? And they carry guns. I don't see any problem with wanting to emulate that somehow, and whether it be through the way you conduct yourself on a daily basis, to hey, your selection of firearms. Maybe there's something that you've always wanted to have that was carried by your hero. I'm going to tell you right now that a lot of the guns carried by our heroes in decades past are becoming very expensive items and collectible items, and they're being snatched up. And now, to talk to people about, the movies and the guns that people associate with the heroes and the bad guys. I mean, that let's not forget the bad guys. The bad guys always carry some really badass guns. Very, very, very seldom will you find, that the bad guy's carrying like an awful gun. That can't keep up. To ask people what your favorite gun is, and how you associate it perhaps with one of your favorite films. I've been asked this question, a number of times over the years. Right away, Lethal Weapon jumps to mind. Mel Gibson always had that Beretta 92 FS, and he blasted his way, to stardom. As Martin Riggs, opposite Detective Murtaugh. And definitely, they produced a number of spin-off movies and sequels. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, if memory serves me correctly. But I mean, like, our heroes carried these guns, and to see people like 92 FS again, like, it appeared so many times over the years. Die Hard, Bruce Willis. I lose track of all the Van Damme movies where he carried a Beretta. All these heroes from my generation carried this gun. And if I go back further, and I start to get into the vintage movies, like Charlie Bronson carrying that Wildie was just, that was an awesome thing. I remember Death Wish 3, and that would have been about the time that, I had an interest in like action type films. I would have been, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 10 or 11 years old. And I remember watching Charlie Bronson. He had this gigantic, monstrous handgun that, blew basketball-sized holes in people in this vigilante series called Death Wish. It was a movie series that they come up with in the 70s, and there was, again, I think there's like 5 or 6 sequels to it. But he carried this monstrous handgun, amongst many others. But the signature piece was this giant silver handgun that was actually a Wildie Automag. And to have an opportunity to handle, shoot, own, guns like that, has always fascinated me. Just to understand how the guns work. To get that feel for the size on a gun like a Wildie. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the new Wildies. There's this fantastic company that's picked up on the design, and they're making it again. And they're making it in a number of different calibers, not just the 45 Win Mag, but they're doing the 475 Wildie, which is this like ridiculously powerful cartridge. If I'm not mistaken, it generates like something in the area of like 454 Casull territory. And it's coming out of a semi-automatic handgun, which is, awesome. And the fact that it's a gas-operated design chews up a lot of that recoil. 454 Casull is like quite the handful. It'd be nice if it wasn't, so jumpy in your hand, and a gun like that would do a lot to soak up the recoil. I actually happen to have owned one at one point in my life and loved the gun. Some people thought, that maybe it could have been made a little bit better. I've talked to the people that are now producing the new Wildie, and they tell me that they've made quite a few corrections to the old design. It's actually one of my favorites. I really like this. This design, and I mean, the ability to like dial this this gauge at the front, ahead of the slide, and kind of dial in the gas, regulator that allows you to kind of determine how fast the slide moves, with various charged loads. And so you could shoot really, really light loads out of it, and you could shoot really, really heavy loads out of it, and you can kind of make it kick the same, which is really cool. The ability to like control where your brass lands is really neat. Like, I mean, you can dial this thing up so the slide just comes back enough to, cycle the action and like gently drop a case at your feet, which is really awesome when ordinarily out of other guns, the same cartridges could be like 30 feet away and in different directions. So it really does take a lot of the work out of, like digging up the brass, which is, kind of expensive compared to other more readily available, calibers that are out there. But the idea that they're producing this gun again, and it's funny because at one point I did, and I mean, I don't say this to brag, but I had spoken to the company before they had made a few last minute changes. I put in some of my input. I'm a huge fan of that gun. And I put a little bit of input into it, and I asked them, I said, can you scallop out that one section of the tang that would kind of bite into the interior of your thumb, where the meets the web of your hand. And I looked at the frames as they were coming off the assembly line. They were taking pictures, and I could see that portion of the frame that had been kind of like carved out to give your thumb kind of a better place to sit, where the frame isn't quite biting into it the same way. And so it was kind of nice to have a little input into that gun. I'd really like to get my hands on one of those. I'm hoping to get in touch with the people over at Wildie again and discuss with them the possibility of sending us one for review. I really liked the original design. I had asked them about some changes, and they said they had made them all. So any and all complaints I ever had about what is quite possibly one of my favorite all-time handgun designs like ever, to have the ability to perhaps shoot a new one with a longer barrel and a much more powerful cartridge like that 475 Wildie would be just so exciting. And I'm really liking the idea of perhaps reaching out to them sometime soon and seeing what their feelings might be on the subject of giving the Vault one to, test and evaluate. Anyway, moving along, I think about other great movies and other great guns. And I think that, a number of people brought, several to my attention that immediately I could identify with. Dirty Harry's, 44 Magnum. That Model 29 Smith & Wesson -2. Just that real hand cannon. I've seen a couple of those lately, and I can totally see why somebody would want to own one of those. If you haven't got a 29-2 in your collection and you're a fan of, Dirty Harry series, it's a must. As a shooter, what a fantastic cartridge that is to reload. It's such an enjoyable shoot. I mean, you can tone it down so that gun feels like a Swiss watch working in your hand, or you could jack it up and get the full effect. But if you've got an older 29-2, you might not want to run really hot ammunition in that all the time. It'd be tempting, but the truth is that you're probably much better off to run light target loads and occasionally spice it up with a hot one. We have a number of different recipes here at the vault that I'd love to share with you guys. I'm trying to find a way to do that. But definitely, giving you guys an idea. H110 powder is this slow burning, wonderful powder for working up hand loads. And what we found is that the more that you use, the better off you are, until you get to a certain point, and then it becomes dangerous. But in terms of accuracy and clean burn, and certainly show-stopping, fire display, there's really nothing like H110 or Winchester 296. I mean, there's some really flashy powders out there. Blue Dot's really incredible too. But amazingly enough, you achieve similar velocities with bullets using Blue Dot, and yet the sound that comes out of the guns is completely different, and all that is relating to pressure buildup. And that kind of brings us to another area that I wanted to talk about tonight, which was hand loading. For all you guys out there that have thought about getting into hand loading, definitely don't do it if you haven't got time for another hobby, or if you're not willing to cut into your shooting time just yet. I guess it depends on how you feel about the idea of saving some money, or you realistically you don't save any money. You just shoot like 3 times the amount for the same money you would spend ordinarily, and it's something that we really enjoy doing here at the Canadian Gun Vault. I think that a lot of our members do the reloading thing now, and enjoy it. Truthfully, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's really an enjoyable kind of activity. Getting the recipes just right, the perfect balance of projectile weight and powder charge, and I mean, to take the different loads out for testing and see what works well, reliability wise, accuracy wise, what's easiest on the gun. These are all things that kind of have to be factored in when dialing in any pistol or rifle, and hand loading allows you the ability to do that, which is really cool. If you haven't done it yet, I highly recommend it. Definitely one thing that I would tell everybody that gets involved, read. It's wise to stick to the guidelines as outlined by reputable companies like Hornady, Lee. People who've been in the business for a while. If they have suggested loadings, don't deviate from those things too much. You read a lot of stuff in the forums. Careful about anything you take from anybody else that seemingly knows what they're doing without kind of cross-checking your data, and cross-reference, and make sure that with a couple other sources, it doesn't sound like it's completely out of whack. If somebody tells you to load up 25 grains of Blue Dot behind a bullet that doesn't sound right, and you're thinking, wow, like everything beyond that was like 9 grains, double check. It's really probably your safest bet. There are old reloaders and there are bold reloaders. I've seen guys kind of push the envelope in terms of performance, and march right into the danger zone. I got a couple of friends that have blown up a couple of guns too, so you definitely want to stay within the guidelines. But not a dangerous activity to gauge in. Certainly wouldn't recommend drinking while you do it, or smoking for that matter. But reloading can be a lot of fun. And for the people out there that want to get into it, we're gonna be offering some things really soon to help you people out. Get you started. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this week's episode of the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door. I'm your host. Hope you've enjoyed it tonight, folks. And as always, shoot straight, stay safe.